Hi, and welcome back to our show, Health, Wellbeing and Lifestyle. Our first guest today is Helen Mack, and this is part of the series Optimising Outcomes, and today she's talking about taking action. So welcome, Helen.
Thanks, Linda.
Can you just start us off by how people would start taking action?
Sure. So we've talked about creating clarity, we've talked about maximising momentum, and we've talked about maintaining mindset. And all of that is fantastic, but if you're only thinking about it, then nothing's going to change. So without action, all we have is contemplation. And thinking never made anything occur. I think some people get into what I call analysis paralysis. They spend so much time thinking about which should I do and what's the best thing to do that they don't realise that by simply choosing to act, they bring in some power from the universe that somehow supports and helps you then take the next step.
So important, isn't it, for us to think about that overthinking takes over so easily in life.
And it's exhausting because you spend your whole time trying to sort out the priorities and which is the best thing and can I and just asking all these questions that end up with you going into a spiral and nothing happens. And then you start beating yourself up about all the things you should do. I call it shoulding all over yourself. I should do this and I should do that. None of that matters. All you need to do is just take a small positive step forward. And the wonderful thing that happens then is that you get feedback. So you take a tiny step and the universe gives you feedback. That was a great decision, Helen, keep going. Or, oh, I don't think so. And you'll get obstacles and things that make it really, really difficult. And a key piece is to watch for those, to notice those messages and go, this is seeming like it's really, really hard. Maybe I should just pause and take a slightly different direction. So I like to use, this is going to give away my age, but I like to use the example of push starting a car. Now there are going to be some of our viewers who go, what are you talking about? Because you can't push start automatics. But in the days of manual cars, you had to get the car into momentum before you could change direction. You had to take action. You had to put some input in to get an outcome. And it's the same with whatever goals you're at. Your viewers may have noticed, if they've been watching, that I'm a bit of a fan of orange. And the other analogy that I love to use is that you can't get orange juice from an orange by looking at it. You actually have to do something. You have to squeeze. And I think life's a bit like that. You don't get the juice out of life if you don't give it a good squeeze.
On that path where people can get caught up in this positive thinking thing, you were talking about that earlier. What's your take on affirmations and that sort of perspective?
I think that one of the challenges that I have with affirmations is that when a lot of people teach affirmations, they teach you to talk in the current tense about things that are going to happen in the future tense. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that because my brain goes, no, I'm not. I say, I'm tall and fit and healthy, and my little voice says, no, I'm not. So I like if I'm going to make statements about my future, I use action words, verbs, like I'm working towards, or I'm taking steps towards, or I'm becoming, rather than I am. Because my brain fights with me. If I say I am something that I'm working towards, I literally have the little voice going, no, you're not. And so I think that's a problem. Now, I'm an optimist by personality and by trade. That's what I teach the world, is how to be more optimistic. The problem with it, thinking doesn't make anything happen. So, bad news for all of us. We cannot sit on the couch and think positively about the red Ferrari coming down the driveway. It's not going to happen. The piece that's missing is what I call the action imperative. The only way to get that red Ferrari, if that's what you want, is to go out and do something to make that happen. And that's why I love optimism as an approach, because optimism has a built-in action imperative. The word itself, optimism, comes from optimus, which is Latin, the search for the good, the search for the best possible. And again, your viewers may remember that from our first episode. So the search for the best possible outcome is built into optimism. It doesn't mean that we are always sweetness and light and balloons and streamers. It means that we take a realistic look at what's going on. Where am I now? Where do I want to go? What's the best possible route for me to get there? And then what's the action I can take to move me towards that goal?
I love that becoming. Because that's totally relevant for me in my journey. I could always have those arguments with myself, and then the overthinking's more compounded, isn't it?
Correct.
You're not feeling like that. So
No.
how can I be that if I'm not feeling?
Yeah,
like
I can't say I am when I'm not yet. So I'm becoming is a very powerful change of verb.
So in regard to bigger things and with that possibility thinking, what sort of action can we take towards that to get the best possible scenario?
So I'm going to start with one that your viewers have probably heard before, because I think a lot of people have heard, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Now, I quite like that analogy, except that I also like elephants. So I don't like the idea of eating elephants. I think the key is to take the tiniest possible step to activate what we talked about a couple of sessions ago around maximising momentum. Once we get into action, once we get into movement, like pushing that stalled car, once we get it moving, then we've got the chance to change direction. It's very hard to change direction from being stopped, from being stationary. In any big project, the key is just to take that first tiny step. Once you get that tiny step, you'll get feedback, you'll have a chance to take more steps and more steps. One of my favourite sayings in this area was delivered to me by a very good friend, Max Dixon, and he said, just choose a single, simple, doable thing. Then you know you've done it, and then you can choose another one. Baby steps will still get you there.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much, Helen, for joining us in this series. For more information on Helen and optimising outcome and today's taking actions on that, then please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And now we'll go to break and be back with another beautiful guest. Stay tuned. After the break, the integrative health and wellness expert, Dr. Zara Celik, is talking about mindfulness. Welcome back. And next we have Dr. Zara Celik, our integrative health and wellness expert. And she's back with us today to talk about mindfulness. So, Dr. Zara, mindfulness is a huge topic.
Huge one at the moment globally, right? It's like a trending word, so we had the self-care, which I talked about, and now mindful is another one, buzzing one, which I love to touch on to them, bring some, put my input into it. And we all have different perceptions and different reflective awareness about mindfulness. So I love to educate our audience and give my perspective on that. So it's overly used, as we all know, but not many people actually know what it exactly means. In fact, I was just talking to one of the young university students, and she knew I was doing a podcast with somebody else, and then she asked me how it went, and it somehow led to this mindfulness. So I was so intrigued to find out really her perspective and what it meant for her in terms of being mindful. And I sort of got to understand and see what universities were teaching and where the students were at. So I thought, it'll be great to sort of bring a bit of light onto this topic. So mindfulness is when the mind is completely balanced. If you think of like an algebra maths equation going back to our early high school, sort of late primary school years, where this one side of the equation equals to the other side of the equation. And that's exactly is what mindfulness is in the mind. So we have two minds. We have the immanent mind, and then we have the transcendent mind. Immanent mind is the amygdala. Transcendent mind is the prefrontal cortex. So it's, I know a bit of neuroscience there. That's okay, but I'm going to explain it more. So when we are in amygdala, we are in fight, flight, freeze. So when we are self-judging, self-critical, or judging other people, or we are living in the trauma, or we have a lot of neuroassociation pattern, we relate to things our past or event took place, we stay at the immanent mind. And we are going to be at fight, flight, freeze. So then that makes the mind unbalanced because we are spending a lot of time in the amygdala, which is the immanent mind. But I like people to be also aware of and become objective and authentic by becoming aware of the transcendent mind, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is the executive center of the brain. At that brain, when we are at prefrontal cortex, when we are objective, we become authentic, we become creative. So when we are critical or we have body dysmorphic things, which we talked about as well previously, we spend more time focusing on what is not right, rather than seeing objectively what it is there for us, and it is happening for us, not to us. When we become aware of the other side of the equation, we go into that transcendent mind. We become objective. We have reflective awareness. So we are not self-critical. We are seeing things as they are. We're not resenting others. We are not infatuated with other people. We're not admiring them and putting them up here, because we're becoming reflective and we're aware of the things that we see in them is also in us. So that will make us more objective, and we have the reflective awareness. I hope I'm not confusing here. I know I'm talking neuroscience, I've got a lot of things going on, but I'm going to explain it more.
So is this with things like, we talked earlier about overthinking, how that can take over?
Correct. So even overthinking, when we're overthinking, overjudging, criticizing, I'm not good enough, I'm not fit enough, I'm not beautiful enough, I'm not rich enough, I don't have the education, the whole, trying to, having the fear, the mind becomes imbalanced. So you're not mindful, you're half mindful, because you're focusing on one side of things and you're not seeing the other things, or you're focusing on one side of you and you're not aware of the other side of you. You're with me there. So that creates the imbalance. Or when we're resenting people, we see all the bad things that they did and how it disadvantaged us, right? But we don't get to see how that person also served us. The minute we see the other side of how that person served us, in the case of resentment, that makes us mindful. In the case of infatuation, when you're admiring somebody, for example, oh, they're so beautiful, they're so fit, they're gorgeous, we have this fantasy, right? That makes us one-sided, so that's half mindful. But the minute we also see it in our form, hey, I've also been fit, I'm also fit in this form, I'm intelligent also, or I'm also wealthy, and I've actually displayed and demonstrated in these sort of situations, and I see it as in me, it's part of me, that makes you again mindful. So the equation is balanced. And that's why I say, think of it as a mathematical model, bit of like an algebra. This side of the equation equals this side of the equation. So when you are aware of only one side of events, you are half mindful. But when you're aware of both sides, you are mindful completely. And that's the thing that actually, when I talk to people, they meditate, try to be mindful, and it's overly used, right? We try to become mindful, and we're meditating and we're investing in ourselves, and it's nice bit of cultural movement globally. People are trying to be mindful, have mindful eating, mindful thinking, mindful language. But if you're not mindful of what's happening within you, then you're not going to be fully mindful. You're half mindful.
So it's like that confusion then that takes over when the confusion, we're not balanced in the mind.
Yeah, so when you're confused, you're not balanced in the mind. So when you're fully aware and you've got reflective awareness and you become objective, then you're authentic yourself. You see, whatever is in other people is actually in you. There's nothing missing, and there's that equity and balance and equanimity within you. Then you are fully mindful, and the biochemistry of the mind is balanced. Because the minute that you're actually critical, the biochemistry shifts. The biochemistry of the mind shifts. The biochemistry of the brain shifts. The biochemistry of the body shifts. But when we are mindful, there's a balance, and that balance within is called equanimity. That's what, homeostasis basically.
What would be your top hint for our viewers, something they can take away today just for themselves to?
So become aware of the language that you're using and see if you are present with yourself. But if you're even struggling with that, see what your mind is doing. Are you focusing only one thing? Are you, for example, judging or criticizing yourself about maybe an event happened during the day? If you are, catch yourself, stop and pause, and see what it is actually there and find the opposite of it. So, for example, if you're resenting somebody, Say, well, okay, what am I resenting them? What am I exactly resenting them for? And then see the benefit of that inaction, or the trait that you're resenting the individual for, and see how that is also serving you, the benefit of that to you. So then you balance that out. If it is an infatuation, you admire somebody, find it in your own form. Then once you find that, that's also balance. If you're judging somebody else, same thing applies. What are you exactly judging them for? How is it a disadvantage to you when you're judging them? Not just the advantage. So then you balance it there too. So try to find balance, but become aware of your language pattern and the language and the words that you use, and see if you can get on to asking yourself the questions to balance the mind.
Well, thank you very much for that. And for more information on Dr. Zara Celik and mindfulness, then please go to her webpage on our website, healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au. And now for break. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. Now we have Robin O'Connell, our funeral celebrant, and talking to us today about supporting families through pregnancy and loss. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you.
And Robin, may I ask you, what led you to be interested in this subject?
So my daughter died 40 years ago. She was nearly 10 months old, and I found that people just didn't know what to do with me. They'd cross the street rather than talk to me. They'd avoid talking about her, or I'd become the supporting person and support them when I told them the bad news. So it led me to a path of grief education, and then finally a funeral celebrant 17 years ago.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And then, so what would be we hear the term stillbirth and miscarriage. What would be the correct term to use?
So it depends how far the gestation is. So under 20 weeks is classed as a miscarriage, and over 20 weeks is classed as a stillbirth. And the reason for that is that over 20 weeks the birth is registered. They can either go for a funeral or a burial or just have a direct cremation, but something must be done with the baby at that point in time. And there's lots of support out there. There's a foundation now that will help families that are in crisis, because we're not expecting a baby to die. So often families can be left unaware with that as well. So there is support around for families who have any sort of pregnancy loss. But I think one of the main things is that people don't know how to handle people when they've had a pregnancy loss. And we have that, what they call, that 12-week rule, where families are said, don't tell anyone till you're 3 months, and that way then, you don't kind of like if anything goes wrong. But in actual fact, those parents need support. If they've been longing for that baby and they're 2 months pregnant, they want to tell the world. And there's this big thing about, oh no, wait till 3 months because you never know what happens. 1 in 4 pregnancies in Australia ends. So it's common. And when people have experienced it and they start telling people about it, they suddenly find that there are all these other people who've had that experience but never said anything. They've never shared that experience because it wasn't talked about. And we need to start the conversation. And lots of people are trying to do that. You might have noticed on October the 15th this year and in a few previous years, there are pink and blue things that go up on buildings. So in different states, there were different buildings all over Australia that were lit up in pink and blue for Pregnancy Infant Loss Day, which is an international day. For people to feel free that even if they're only 6 weeks pregnant, that they can share that joy with others, even if it doesn't go right. Because at least then they're acknowledged that, people are reluctant to even say, oh, I actually had a miscarriage at 6 weeks, but it was only 6 weeks. But to them, that was a baby. I know a family who had 11 pregnancy losses, and every one of those pregnancies, no matter how soon, as soon as they got those 2 little lines, as soon as they got those lines, they wanted to shout it to the world, because it's important to them that their babies are recognised.
Well, for both parents, I suppose, particularly women with the hormones racing, That's a loss no matter what goes on, and then the men would be feeling it as supporters of the.
And I think that's where we let them down all the time, because we always say, so how's the wife doing? And we don't say, how are you doing? How do you feel about this? It was your baby too. But they think because the wife is the one who is pregnant, that that's the one who's going to be feeling it more. And two people decide to have a baby. And it's really important that dads are recognised as well.
And I suppose in same-sex marriages, it plays out as well. There's the other partner is still feeling that.
Yes, and it's, you know, people don't go off and say, oh, I think I'll have a baby and I'll go home and tell my husband tomorrow. You know, they talk about it, they plan, they have dreams, they have hopes for that baby, and those dreams and hopes are shattered. So we need to do more as a society to be able to say, you know, it's okay to talk about it. You know, if you know the day that the baby was born, you know, remember it, put it in your diary for next year. Give the person a call and say, hey, how are you doing today? I know today was the day that Noah was born. You know, it's real, those little things mean so much. And often we're thinking them. You know, so I met up with a family member who I hadn't seen for many, many years. And she put her hand on me and she said, you know, I think of you every 7th of August, which would have been Rebecca's birthday. And I thought, that's fantastic, but I would have loved to have known that you did that. I only found out like 20 years later that every year she thinks of her. And that would have meant so much to me.
Oh, absolutely. So then, what would you say is a take-home message for our viewers to know how they can support others?
Oh, the most important thing is you are not alone. And I think that's the hardest part, is that isolation of thinking you're so alone, it's only you, maybe 40 of your closest family that are affected by a pregnancy loss or an infant loss. And it's not a very broad spectrum of people. And people hear about it. That, you know, might mention it to somebody that you work with and they'll go, oh, that's sad. But it's a fleeting thought. And then they go on with their lives where your life has been irreversibly changed.
Those people don't know how to have the discussion, really, do they?
No, and we need to be more comfortable with having that discussion. We need to ask the questions of, you know, what were you looking forward to? What were the things that you wanted to happen? So they get a chance to voice them because they've been in their head.
And Robin, what would be some tips for our viewers from today?
Remember them at Christmas. So have a candle on the table, do something like that. Remember them on birthdays, give people a call. Just be able to be with them and let them talk and say, how do you feel? And then say, but how do you really feel? Because we will naturally say, I'm okay. But just ask how they really feel. And you might just be surprised at their answer. Don't worry if it brings tears. The tears were there anyway. All you've done is to help release them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just for any more information on pregnancy and loss and supporting those people experiencing that, then please go to our website healthwellbeingandlifestyle.com.au and there'll be more information on Robin. And for now we'll say bye-bye and we'll see you back here next week. If you'd like to know more about our show, please like our Facebook page and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.